Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined this week by Ruairi Walsh, and hopefully we'll have Kieran Collins in due course. Ruairi, how are things?
Great, Mark. Great to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we took a bit of a hiatus at the start of 2026. I know we've been busy on the WhatsApps, whatever, and said, sure, we'll give this another go for this year. Good to have you on, Rory. I suppose this episode, we'll have just a quick review of the Allianz Hurling League's 1A, 1B. Just get Rory's impressions of the league fixtures and leading into this weekend. We have two fascinating fixtures lined up into US Gaelic grounds. We have Clare against Dublin at 1:45 and Limerick playing Cork at 4 p.m. I suppose, Rory, before we get to the finals, get your thoughts in terms of maybe 1A, 1B as a whole. Anything to really call out during those league fixtures?
I suppose that you're kind of looking at how each individual county fared. Some, better than others. And as we know with the league, there's always a warning sign of not reading too much into it. But there are definitely trends in some situations. I suppose a big thing, with how Tipperary we're going to get on, judging with looking at Clare the year before and how, it can be hard to come down from the All-Ireland high and be focused again for the next league. But I think Tipperary, they got to experiment those few players that they brought through in the league, but also they were in a situation where they had a huge game against Waterford, where if they lost, remember, they were going to be in that relegation playoff more or less with Kilkenny, and they didn't lose that game. Like, they won the game they had to, and then went on and won their last game as well. So look, I think Tipperary be reasonably happy with how they got on in the league. What was great about it overall, Mark, though, is how teams I thought they really wanted to win the games they were playing in, and that hasn't been the case always in the league. There have been real dud games over the years, but that didn't seem to be the case this year. By and large, most of the games, especially the big ones televised, were of a decent standard, and teams were kind of going at it. I suppose Galway are one of the stories of the league as well. Michael Donoghue, he's really torn up the script and thrown in lots of new players, which they had to do, and a lot of them seem to settle really well. What was interesting, I suppose, the game against Limerick. I was at that game there a couple of weeks ago and just kind of impressed with how Galway didn't throw in the towel, because in previous years, the white flag would have been raised, and it's something we've criticised them of. And they kind of dug in there and had their moment in the second half and, got themselves back in the game. And I know there was an element of maybe Limerick putting on the handbrake as well, but that's, you have to credit Galway for how they stuck at it. And I was impressed, substitutes to come in for Galway, really strengthened the team as well. So it's a sign that they have found, talent good enough for this level, and I think they're going to be a lot, more competitive. I know they kind of qualified out of Leinster last year, but they really put up a poor showing against Tipperary in the All-Ireland series. I just think they're going to be that bit better this year. Maybe a year or two too soon to be All-Ireland contenders, but I think they're definitely on the right track. We could see that during the league. So overall, look, Cork as well, they had to bounce back from the All-Ireland final, and I think they have bounced back well. It doesn't take much to get Cork confident. And I think the confidence is back in Cork straight away. And, Ben O'Connor has settled in, and you can see he's trying to give that physical edge to Cork, which maybe, has been deemed to be lacking in big games. And, again, has found a couple of young lads, but especially in the forwards, Ruairi Walsh and these lads, who have impressed good in the air when they've come in, Adam Walsh as well. And, they definitely have, a few more strings to their bow, I think, going into the championship. But look, again, we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. The full back line is still the huge question mark over Cork, and until they have proven to have resolved that, I think, they might struggle in the biggest of days. But, overall, 1A, as I said, good competitive games. And also, you'd have to say, I think the two teams that were most consistent throughout the league, and best two teams in 1A are in the final, without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with you, Rory. I think 1A and 1B were pretty competitive, I suppose. 1A, I mean, from a Waterford perspective, I suppose hopes were high after that opening round win against Limerick down in Walsh Park, but it kind of deteriorated for them a little bit. Offaly, it was a big, massive learning curve from 1B to 1A. They did have admirable moments, particularly down in Nolan Park to face Kilkenny. And I suppose Kilkenny as well, looking at the league, probably got plenty of learnings from the league, particularly with the likes of TJ Reid not available for the early rounds. Hugh Lawler was abroad as well, and they have tried and experimented. So it'll be a fascinating kind of dynamic there for Kilkenny as well, how they basically regroup after the league. Cork as well, talent that they have had in that squad in the last few years, and have really supplemented very well. And Limerick have kind of come back in, particularly from the Munster Senior League, coming into the league as well. There's been momentum there built as well. So look, an awful lot of competitive games. And I suppose, do we want to start off with the 1A league final here, Rory, with Limerick and Cork? I suppose, as you say, the two most consistent teams probably in the league in 1A. And I suppose, what are your kind of main kind of highlights or talking points heading into the final?
Yeah, like there is an element of they're going to be playing each other in 3 to 4 weeks, in Limerick's round 1, Cork's round 2. You're wondering, will this have a bearing on this game? You hope it won't. Both teams will go after it and like put that game to one side. That's what I'd be hoping for. And look, there's silverware online, and nothing boosts the team more than getting that hands on the trophy. It didn't do Clare any harm a couple of years ago, like Cork all the way to the Ireland final last year, and at half-time everything was rosy as well. So I just hope both teams go at it, and we are, given a classic, like the fans are excited, games sold out. That rivalry has been growing there. It's gone from the Clare Limerick to Cork Limerick at the minute in terms of maybe I won't say a bitter rivalry, but it's becoming a lot more heated game on game. So we're looking forward to hopefully a classic game. And as I said, like both teams were pretty consistent throughout the league. Like the only game Cork lost was that game in Limerick. Dealt with other opposition, pretty convincingly. Limerick themselves, I know they had a tight run in with Galway, but after they lost that Waterford game, they did bounce back well. And put Tipperary to the sword, as we remember, down in Thurles. And look, it's going to be interesting. I think it also gives, I think both managements are going to feel like they have to put fresh blood into the team this year. Like the Limerick team, we were saying last year how it was still the bones of the 2019 team, and now you have Aidan O'Connor being given a more central role in the team, Shane O'Brien, Adam English in midfield, Cathal O'Neill, who's been there around for the last few years, but I think Kylie wants these boys now to take over the responsibility and leadership in the team. Yeah, so that's kind of where Limerick are looking at. I still think Limerick probably need to find another back or two if they get a couple of injuries in the backs. I'm not sure what the cover is like. And then the question is, half back line. Is Will O'Donoghue going to stay at 6? It looks that way at the minute. Is he going to have one last look at somebody else at 6 for the league final? Because you are losing, I think, Will O'Donoghue's value midfield, where he's just a tenacious midfielder, covers ground and does a lot of, turnovers, fierce tackling. And I think at 6, you do miss that. And you either replace that midfield, which is really hard to do, or you find somebody else to go centre back and put Will back out midfield. So I think, look, there are a couple of things maybe Kylie hasn't fully answered yet, and the league final gives him a perfect opportunity against high quality opposition, to check out some of those thoughts he might have.
Yeah, I completely agree from a Limerick perspective. I mean, look, the tail of the tape is they won 5 out of their 6 games. Their opening round loss against Waterford, you could probably call that ring rust. But again, I think Waterford were far superior on the day. I mean, they've scored 171 points overall to 133. 8 goals scored. They were a bit goal shy at the start of the league here, Rory, as well, from a Limerick perspective. But then goals then started to flow fairly freely here for the likes of Shane O'Brien, Aaron Gillan. And I mean, I suppose Aidan O'Connor being kind of the find here, hasn't he? He's taken over the free-taking duties here. 153 from the league so far. And I mean, Cathal O'Neill, like he's had a kind of an injury-free pre-season. Third level with University of Limerick and Fitzgibbon Cup, he's been unmarkable, really, hasn't he? And he's chipped in with 311 from play. But again, the Keane Lynch here aspect here, Rory, as well. Another guy who had a magnificent start to the year last year, then got a little bit injured, and then hit into Dublin in an All-Ireland quarter-final. So I think the key cogs here, I think certainly are running well. But as you said here, Rory, I think concern probably is on the back line, really. And given some recent injuries and also retirement of Declan Hannon, it is kind of forcing the depth chart a little bit, isn't it, Rory? And let's say if one or two from, let's say, Dan Morrissey, Mike Casey, or go down with injury, it does ask questions of John Kiley and Paul Knirk, who will actually step up, given, as you say, some player departures as well.
Yeah, and I know, look, Darragh Langan played at full back against Galway, and straight away he was on Conor Whelan, which is a real baptism of fire to go in a big game. So look, they have Matthew Fitzgerald started against Waterford, played very well, and then picked up an injury. And I see he was just back for the Limerick 20s last night and was playing in the forward line for them. He's a very versatile player. I think Kiley will be, a bit upset that he didn't get a chance to see him, give him another go during the league, because he did impress in that Waterford game. And I know he got a black card in it, but it showed he stepped in and shipped or gave and shipped a big tackle at the same time. It showed a bit of bravery, I thought, for a young lad coming in, willing to put his body on the line in the first match. And, it was a good sign for me, for if you're looking for a guy to step straight into senior, go straight into the physical part of it. But Limerick, I think, they have looked at one or two extra backs. I don't know, have any of them really nailed down a place? It's hard to see anyone other than, the usual kind of 6 starters there. I know, including Will at centre back there, Will O'Donoghue, but otherwise you're looking at 5 of the 6 backs, I think, that played last year's championship if they're injury free. So yeah, Dan as well has had a kind of a league campaign where he's been missing games through injury. So look, there are a few question marks. I'm sure Kylie would love to see the back settled against Cork and go well in that league final. And then, it's just one less probably question mark for him then going into the Munster Championship if he can be pretty sure if he's 6 backs.
Absolutely. And I think the other option probably is Kyle Hayes maybe switching to 6 potentially, and maybe allowing like Colin Coughlin, who's had a prominent year again with University of Limerick and Fitzgibbon Cup, has had 1 or 2 league appearances. I think this is the year for maybe a Colin Coughlin to really kind of stake a claim as well. But again, as you say, it's that 6 jersey is kind of up for grabs, and maybe it's horses for courses here from Kylie and Connacht's perspective, given the opposition that they will be playing. And I suppose as well, likes of Shane O'Brien and also Aaron Gillan seem to be forging a very good full forward partnership here as well. Rory, just given their recent performances. Just thinking of Shane O'Brien's performance against Cork in the opening league encounter between the two sides. But also Aaron Gillan is warming up to the task nicely in the last few games.
Yeah, look, they're a potent full forward line, and both of them are similar in that they're both very good in the air. And it just means if your team can kind of launch from any direction, like once you've the likes of Burns or whatever get space in the back line, they can hit the full forward line directly, knowing that it doesn't even have to be a 70-30 ball, just a high ball in there, and it favours either the two of them. And they're going to be a handful for Cork. Like if you were looking at the Cork point of view, they're probably Limerick are going to try and expose a 2-2 back there, but I think Cork are going to have to have the extra man cover, because you cut off even the goal threat from the two of them, and it just gives Cork a better foothold in the game. Yeah, and look, it is an area. I think until Cork prove otherwise, every team are going to try and target that full back line, and with high ball as well, especially. And I know like new full back in there this year with Darragh O'Leary, and they pushed Owen Downey out to centre back, where I actually think he looks a bit more comfortable at 6. But yeah, again, until Cork prove otherwise, if I were Limerick, I would go straight at that full back line. And it'll be also for Ben O'Connor, if he can get the right men, he can learn a lot here, get the right matchups on Gillan and O'Brien. And, all going well, like it'll just, be another question mark for him going into the Munster Championship of who his best full back line are, because he still must have doubts, even though they seem to have coped okay during the league. I think this will give a better indicator. And the only thing is, if they're taken apart, he's kind of back to square one, I think. And, 2 weeks out from Munster Championship, going to Thurles to play the All-Ireland champions, you don't want your full back line taken apart. And it's just, I potentially can see this happening. Providing, like, again, Limerick would have to get a foothold out the field and, deliver that kind of high ball we're talking about, good quality diagonal high ball in. And if that happens, I just see, I see Cork being in trouble. And if they prove otherwise, as I said, it'll be a massive boost for Ben O'Connor.
I think it's a big test for Ben O'Connor and the management, particularly, as you say, Rory rightly say. They're only a few weeks out from the first round of Munster Senior Hurling Championship against Tipperary, and the worst thing they could do here is for the full backline to get absolutely exposed. Do you feel that Ben O'Connor and the management may kind of resort to maybe bringing a few players back, maybe a sweeper, just behind maybe a Darragh O'Leary, just to kind of protect the house a little bit?
I do. Or else Owen Downey might sit very deep and they'll cover it that way, bring a 2 in the full forward line and then bring a wing forward back to midfield and so on, and just cover it that way. Have a really deep centre back. But even still, it's just the kind of the runs, especially Gillan, he has a way of checking his run and switching to the other side and still getting space for himself. But, even I thought Morrissey from Galway did well on him for so long, but then all it takes just 2 or 3 balls and he's, penalty one or ball in the back of the net. Like, it's very hard to contain for the whole game and he's on this form. I suppose one criticism, in the past is goal chances, that sometimes I think we saw the one against Dublin where he's 1-1 and like it's a 90% goal, and sometimes he doesn't finish those chances. I think closer to goal more so when he turns it to 21 and takes a shot, he seems more likely to score than when he's racing through. But look, I'm sure it's something he's worked on individually, because I think with that full forward line, Limerick could be a bit more goal happy and really take on backs, and especially doing the Munster Championship is like goals are massive in it. Like I think the days where in 2017 Galway winning All Ireland without scoring a goal, which was remarkable at the time, I think they're kind of gone. I think goals have become a major part again. You just look at Tip and Kilkenny All Ireland semi-final last year, where the 4 goals for Tipperary basically, swung a game where they were possibly being out-fought in a lot of positions, but yet, those goals basically won them the match. So look, I think with the full forward line they have and the danger inside, it'd be crazy for them not to put an emphasis on goals, and I think that's the way they will be going.
Absolutely. Looking at Cork's record again, similar to Limerick, 5 wins out of 6. The loss obviously coming in round 6 against Limerick in TUS Gaelic grounds. Could argue Cork really did try out a few players from during that fixture. I suppose their points total 174 points for, 132 against, 16 goals, 6 of them against Offaly, showing the potency. And a stat that I kind of saw there in one of the media outlets in Cork, 36-man squad, only Saunderson, Ben Cunningham and O'Sullivan were the only 3 players not to be used by Cork in the league, which I suppose, Rory, is indicating that Ben O'Connor has really been looking at the depth charts a bit during this league campaign.
And look, he's had to, changes had to be kind of made. I think as well, the team needed freshening up. Not that any of them are over the hill or anything, but just they had gone through a lot of, let's say, 2 really tough All Ireland defeats in a row, and sometimes just that fresh blood in, that young lad coming in from the under-20s who's brings a bit of enthusiasm to everything and doesn't have that burden of defeat, can lift even some of the older guys around. So I think they have done that. Like, as I said, Alan Walsh, I thought, has looked good. He's strong in the air. Yeah. He's given a boost. As we know, Cork we're talking about Limerick being goal happy. Cork, as we know, last year really emphasised going for goal. Brian Hayes, we know, was a bit of a goal machine in there, and Connolly as well. And they were the full forward line everyone was worried about last year. And just having those young lads coming through as well. I think Cork definitely forward wise are going to be a massive threat for everyone, and it will be for Limerick in the league final. I think Fitzgibbon back in half forward as well. Just he can still work back and do the work he was doing at midfield, but just gets him that bit closer to goal where he can make an incisive run in to set up a score. I think we saw it against Galway up in Salthill, where I thought he had a massive game at wing forward that day. And even Harnedy as well showed that he's not past it either, and he'd be a great man to bring in. I think maybe Cork overused him last year, starting him in a lot of games. I think he might be better coming in 15-20 minutes to go, just at experience, and as we know, he'll find a bit more space. And we know his accuracy is incredible. So, yeah, it's going to be an enthralling league final. And yeah, they're I suppose it sounds very basic, like how will the Limerick full back line handle the Cork full forward line and vice versa. But that is, for me, the story of the game. They are, Cork's biggest threat is that full forward line, as is Limerick's. And just to see whoever can get the better of the opposition forward line, I think is going to, have a better chance. Obviously, well, there'll be 90% there. So look, it's going to be an intriguing one, and you just wonder psychologically as well, Mark, what blow will it do to the team losing, in terms of, like, if one team were to lose heavily, especially Cork because of what happened in the All-Ireland final. I think it'd be harder for them to shake off a heavy defeat here. And I know they did that last year in the round robin, where they had a massive defeat up in Limerick and then came back for the Munster final a couple of weeks later and, won it in penalties and produced a massive performance in just a couple of weeks. So they have been able to bounce back before, but you wonder, is one more big defeat in a big game going to really, put pressure? I think more so it'll have uncertainty amongst management as to the best 15. Whereas I think if Limerick were to lose, I think John Kiley he knows these guys a bit more seasoned, and yeah, I think it'll be a bigger blow for Cork if they were to lose, in a one-sided affair. But it's hard to see that happening, Mark. Both teams, the last few times they've met, apart from that game in the round robin, like I'm talking about the game down in Cork 2 years ago in Munster Championship, the All-Ireland semi-final, the cracking game at Croke Park, and then last year's Munster final, the teams were so evenly matched if you take out that round robin match, and I'm expecting something like that again.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with you completely, Rory. And I think it's what the physical toll will take on both teams. like it's a national final at the end of the day, Rory, and we saw the physicality and the toll it took both on Limerick and Cork in a provincial final, and the after effects of that, with a Munster round robin fast approaching for both teams. And you can say what you like about Limerick in a round robin, but again, this is the scene where Cork went to Limerick last year to US Gaelic grounds and won a title. So I think for both, it's plenty on the line. You have to win it when you're there. And I suppose from a Cork perspective, I think it's quite clear to me that Patrick Collins still retains the faith of Ben O'Connor. I mean, he's played 350 minutes in these games for Cork this year. Likes of Tommy O'Connell as well has been very paramount in central midfield, and also Owen Downey as well. They've all had 350 minutes or thereabouts. And again, it's looking at that axis of Cork here and looking for one or two others to really deliver. And I mean, likes of Brian Hayes come back in late from club football duties. He's chipped in with 5-6. Alan Connolly has assumed kind of free taking role responsibilities. He's hit 129, 22 points from frees. The key characters here come into the pot. But again, as you say, Rory, it'll be just an intriguing matchup here, just in terms of what full forward line will actually look to create the goal scoring chances and convert. I suppose prediction wise, Rory, for Sunday?
I'll go with Limerick. Just, I know I'm nearly contradicting myself in that Cork came up and won the big trophy there last year, but Cork are out a week earlier than Limerick. You just feel if things are coming down, like what you said there, Mark, and there is this physicality in the game, will Cork have one eye on that game in Thurles? Not saying they don't want to win it, but will it be weighing in their back minds, whereas Limerick have a bit more freedom at it? Just another small thing as well. I know like a lot was spoken about Ben O'Connor and his kind of view of, let's say, referees being too harsh and, let's say, yellow cards are given for nothing and this and that. I think that like it definitely has affected the players, and that I think every game Cork played, there was some incident where it was bordering on red yellow, and the kind of referee sided with the yellow side. I'm thinking of the Mark Coleman strike up in Galway, and there was a couple more like that. And you just wonder, like, when referees look at their reviews, are they seeing clips with Cork each time? If you know what I mean. And then we had the kind of the melee down in Cork. Actually, that was the one time a guy shouldn't have got sent off, was the melee down in Cork. But there was one or two other incidents in that game. And you kind of wonder, are Cork featuring a lot in these referee reviews? And will it end up with a red card in a serious game? Like even last year, Barrett up in Ennis, that red card really swung the game in Clare's favour to come back and get the draw from, when Cork should have had that game won. So I just think it's a small subplay. I think Cork need to tone down, like, I'm not saying physicality, but kind of the loose hurleys, if you know what I mean, the kind of like late flicks and stuff, because they could get a silly red card very easily. And I think, in my own opinion, I think they're going to be watched based on the league round robin and maybe a factor on Sunday. But it's just something I thought that has been a bit of a factor, because we all agreed that Cork's physicality need to be upped a bit, especially the Ireland final against Clare in 2023, where like bizarrely Clare had no free in the whole second half of normal time. And looking back, I'm not saying that we deserved 7 or 8 frees, but it was because there weren't really tackles going in that you were giving Johnny Murphy a decision either. So that's another factor. Like so look, they definitely need to up the physicality, but you can do that without, let's say, these incidents where there's a late hurley and so on, where you're given a ref a decision to make, because I think they've been favoured in a few of them that it's fallen down the right side of the yellow, whereas I think there was a Tommy O'Connell one against Limerick as well early in the game. But look, as I say, it could very easily go red, and if that happens, like they're putting themselves in an unnecessary situation. So just a small subplot going into the league final.
Absolutely, and it's a big day for Shane Hines as well from Galway, who's officiating the 1A final here. Big game for him, big game for his club as well. So we wish him well. But again, you're kind of looking for Cork here. I think the physicality, you could represent that to work rate more so here, Rory. And if they can only look at the second half of that Tipperary All-Ireland final, the work rate dropped dramatically in the middle third. Tipperary kind of inflicted the killer blows here, and there was no real response. So I think, as you say, this might be more of a subplot when we get into Championship, the blood and thunder of it. I think my prediction-wise, I'll just edge it to Limerick, but I think Limerick have to be vastly more improved than they were against Galway. That drop-off in the third quarter particularly would have alarmed John Kiley and Paul Kinnerk no end. And I think Cork could take a tip or two from that Galway performance, basically bringing one or two of the wing forwards back into that middle third, congesting the middle third, winning turnover ball, and going with a run game, which Cork are so potent at here, Rory, as well. So, and as also Kilkenny as well earlier on in the league did, Owen Cody particularly with the run game, did cause Limerick defensively a few issues. So, look, if Limerick can counteract that down the stretch, maybe they have the hunger here to kind of get another league title under their belt here. And I think it was probably a target for Limerick at the start of the year to be in a league final and be competitive. And look, we'll see where it goes, but hopefully game will be an absolute classic. And yeah, as you said, there could be ramifications for both teams here moving into the championship. I suppose the curtain raiser here at 1:45 on Sunday is the meeting of Clare and Dublin in the 1B final. I'm looking forward to this immensely, Rory. I know Clare went 6 for 6 in the league, but let's recall Cusack Park in Ennis at the start of the league. Dublin nearly beat Clare in their own backyard, so I think Clare will be under no illusions here. This will be a formidable Dublin challenge in this opening game on Sunday.
That was the tightest game Clare got was that game and best challenge you got. So I think in a way, Lohan is kind of delighted that it is Dublin again in the league final because they're definitely a team on the up. We saw that last year. I know they went down badly against Cork in the Leinster semi-final, but had put in some big performances in Leinster and of course that quarter final against Limerick when they were down to 14 men. So like they're definitely going to get a challenge from Dublin. And again, going into Munster Championship, there was the fear coming from 1B that you'd be undercooked going in there, and it was a real fear, like from a Clare point of view, because that was the disappointing thing about I found from 1B overall, Mark, was the amount of kind of teams that were way off it, like Antrim down. It's I think the gap is almost increased from, if you want to say it, the Munster big 4 or 5 down to the 1B teams. Whereas a couple of years ago, I remember when it was kind of a split Division 1 between 2-7 teams, like 2 teams of 7. I remember even the 1B teams traditionally then, like the likes of Westmeath and Antrim, they were a lot more competitive. And in just a couple of years, the gap really seems to have grown. Kildare, I think, came out of 1B a bit more admirably. I think they were a bit more competitive. But yeah, definitely gap has grown there. And the danger from a Clare point of view is that they were going to go in after kind of a lot of facile victories. And even the Wexford game up in Ennis, Clare were well in control, up 10, 11, 12 points until they kind of, a bit like Limerick Galway, put the foot off the gas and Wexford came back at them. And this was a game Wexford had to win. I was just disappointed really in Wexford in that day, whereas Clare were experimenting. Wexford had to, they had a chance of going up had they won in Ennis, and just the performance wasn't there. So I think, again, as I said, Dublin being in the final, really, it's a game that Clare would have really wanted and should be a real good prep for championship. And the fact, look, I know it's only 1B, but there's a trophy there. And, I think both sides will be, like, think of the confidence it would give Dublin to come down to Limerick and beat Clare in Munster, going into a Leinster championship. It would be a huge boost for them. So I'm sure they're going at this all guns blazing. And I think from a Dublin point of view as well, they won't have the hectic schedule Clare will have in Munster, where they're going to have a couple of games in Leinster where they should be comfortable. Let's be honest about it. Their big battles will be the Wexford, Galway, Kilkenny, those games, and the other games, in a way, won't be as heated. So they can really come at this, and be just interesting to see. Will they have built on last year? Like we saw the havoc John Heatherton caused inside. They're a real threat in the air, as we know. Ronan Hayes very good in the air as well, and now Liam Rush is dusted off the boots and is back in as well. And I'm wondering, are we going to see Liam Rush back in the forward line, where they can pick 2 out of 3 there, and just it's become we spoke about it last year. It's back in vogue. High ball into the big man inside, causing havoc for teams. And Dublin definitely would have weapons, going that way. And also look with Curry, Sean Curry, Keane O'Sullivan, they have the nippy, threat as well. So I think their forward line have really become a lot more dangerous. And I suppose if there is frailties, it is that back line, as we saw against Cork, just taken apart in the Ireland semi-final. I know John Bellew had a great year, and it's just have Dublin strengthened up things there. And I know Owen O'Donnell is back after his experiment with football. He's definitely going to have strengthened things. So things are positive for Dublin. They should be building on last year, and they're definitely, like, if you're looking at Wexford, are Dublin going the opposite direction? Are Wexford slowly in decline, and are Dublin kind of the team on the up? It'd be interesting to hear Kieran's views when he's back in this. Absolutely. But the evidence would seem to suggest that, and it should be a very good game. The only thing, Mark, as we know from curtain raisers, is there can be a weird atmosphere. You'll have crowd, coming in during the game, and it is hard to get an atmosphere going. I'm thinking of All-Ireland quarter-final double headers. The first game can often be the one, and you just kind of hope that the crowd come in early for it, because I think they'll be treated to a really good quality game against what could turn out, as we know from round one in Ennis, two very even teams. So yeah, it's one I'm definitely looking forward to, and I'll be in early to get my spot in the terrace. Tickets for the stand are at a premium out in 6 Mile Bridge, so I'm happy to set with the terrace one for this game.
Absolutely, and look, there's going to be a huge contingent from Clare probably in there from early doors anyway, and hopefully it'll be a few Dublin supporters coming down to Limerick as well, because look, these are two kind of very eagerly anticipated games, really. I mean, look, we'll focus with Clare first. I mean, 100% record, as you say. That Tony Kelly's late goal to beat Dublin early doors. They've averaged 32 points per game. They've conceded 22 points per game. 9 goals scored. An awful lot of goals early on in the league. Round robin fixtures, 6 conceded. I suppose who stood out for you, Rory, from a Clare perspective in the league?
Yeah, I suppose like Shane Meehan in a corner forward started every game. I pretty much I think so, and scored in every match and looked a threat. A bit like kind of Aidan O'Connor in the Limerick. He's been around for a few years and has been coming in cameo appearances as a sub here and there. And people are beginning to wonder, like, when's he kind of, because massive promise as a minor and under 20. When was he actually going to nail down a place? Now, it's a tough forward line to break into, but this seems to be the year. Lohan seems to have been shown a lot of faith in him. And again, no more so than what we said, Limerick and Cork, just that fresh guy coming in there, breaking into the team, bringing that enthusiasm. And Clare starting to really blood a lot of those kind of minors and 20s from the last couple of years. Dermot Stritch from Clonlara has featured a lot during the league. Will he nail down a starting place? I'm not sure, but will be a weapon off the bench. Jack O'Neill as well, who made the Fitzgibbon Team of the Year from Clooney Quinn. He featured a lot for Clare in the league last year, and then didn't get that much of a go in the championship. Played very well actually. Let's say the last round robin game against Limerick last year in the championship, when it was a bit of a dead rubber, but it was very impressive that day. Yeah, look, they're the guys that have kind of stood out from a Clare point of view. The big question mark for Clare is what they're going to do 3 and 6, because Conor Cleary is back, and look, he's had a full run at the minute, but is John Conlon going to start at 6? Like, we'll find out from the league final. I think Clare were looking a bit at David McInerney, but he went off in the warm-up the last day, so Lohan hasn't really had a good chance to see him at 6. Cathal Malone has gone back to wing back, and you've Diarmuid Ryan at the other side, and a bit like how Kiley doesn't really want to take Kyle Hayes out of wing back, I don't think Lohan wants to take Diarmuid Ryan out of wing back, because of kind of the attacking threat both players have. So people would have thought he was the natural successor to John Conlon, but if John Conlon has another year in him, and word in Clare is he might, that he seems to be going well at the minute. Like, it's remarkable stuff. Like, not just his age, but the amount of years he has done. Like, he was starting with Clare when he was just out of minor, so he's a huge amount of years put in, and also the horrific finger injury he had recently, and just for him to have the enthusiasm to bounce back. And I'm sure we all saw the interview with the work he had to put in to just, let's say, get his finger back working again, first of all, and then to try and get back, hurling as well. Like, it's incredible stuff, really. And if he can nail down that 6 spot again for another season, fair play to him. But you'd have to think there are question marks over, can he go another year, and what's the plan B if he can't? And maybe the Dublin game is a perfect chance to see if John Conlon is flying. It's a great sign going into the Munster Championship. If not, then what will Clare do next? But I think they seem to be in a good place, Mark. A big factor as well is Rogers. He had a real off season last year, but he seems to be back to his best, albeit in 1B. But he seems to be a real threat, and it's the type of scores he's getting in games. Real confident scores from crazy angles and so on. It's a real sign of a player. He's taken over free taking duties. Has been a small bit erratic at times with frees. So look, let's hope he gets a bit more settled in them, because it's massive in modern hurling, and as we can see from Kilkenny and TJ, wins you tight games. So let's hope that goes well. So from a Clare point of view, yeah, I think Lohan will be happy so far in the league, and they'll be hoping for a big performance and a confidence boosting performance against Dublin on Sunday.
No, absolutely, Rory. And I mean, to be fair to Brian Nolan, he has tested the depth chart, particularly in the forward line. An awful lot of youngsters, underage stars, have basically been given their cameos. They've gotten some stiff challenges, all right. I mean, the Dublin game particularly, but also the away game against Kildare, surprisingly enough. But I mean, we shouldn't be really too surprised given Kildare's emergence this year. So, look, I think all points well for Clare. I suppose, Rory, going into on Sunday, do you expect Brian Lohan and management for Clare to name their strongest side here to just set the statement of intent heading into Munster, or are they going to hold something back here?
No, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't go strong, because it's the best way you learn. Maybe have that one guy, that you're thinking about, see how he gets on, which may not happen first round in Munster, but this is a perfect opportunity to do that. So I think it was vital Clare got to this final. And in another way, it was vital for Clare by view that Dublin were the opposition too, because you're going to learn, the Dublin forward line, as you mentioned, are potent. And if you're trying a guy in the back line and, if he can handle a Keane O'Sullivan or, a Ronan Hayes, it's a great sign for him going into Munster Championship. At the same time, if they struggle, then they're obviously going to be kind of a line put through them as a starter. But definitely, Clare had to build depth. Like we saw last year, the few injuries in the backs. Now, when I say a few, you were looking at Conor Cleary, Jeremy Ryan, John Conlon, Conor Lean gone off. You're looking at 4 out of the 6 backline that started getting injured. David McInerney as well. So it was an injury crisis, but Clare did not have the depth. And that showed like badly up against Tip up in Ennis, and down in Waterford as well. So look, you're hoping for an injury-free run, but also if there are injuries that you have, players willing to and able to jump straight in there. So look, what I suppose another plus for Clare was I was at the under-20s game against Waterford last week out in 6 Mile Bridge, and Clare were pox to win the game. Got a goal near the end, but lucky that Waterford had missed chance after chance for points, easy scores before that. But what impressed me for Clare was the 2 best players I thought were Loftus, fullback from Éireog, who was on the UL Pressure team, and also Gunning, who was the captain of the team 3 years ago at minor level from Broadford. So it was just when we kind of need backs to come along, our most impressive performances were from backs. So that's, something that Lohan will be glad to see, like that there are guys putting their hand up at under 20 level as well to come in, because, as I said, that backline definitely needs more depth.
Absolutely. No, Gunning and Loftus have been very impressive. Like Loftus, particularly for University of Limerick, because that was a troublesome spot for them, and he filled the role admirably there. Allowed Mark Fitzgerald to venture.
But Éireog as well. Éireog as well. He was a shining light for Éireog in the championship. Played wing back for Éireog, and for a young lad to come in there and just look so comfortable. But very impressive against Waterford. So yeah, it is. Look, it is promising because coming out of Cusack Park last year with Clare out of the championship, you're kind of saying we need to find more backs, and look, hopefully these lads will settle into senior. But from a Dublin point of view as well, Mark, we're just saying they're definitely on the up. I think one of the shrewdest managerial appointments was O'Callaghan, just bringing in a man who knew Dublin hurling through and through. Like we often associate Dublin with bringing in the outsider and the big name and so on, and it can have a boost. But if Dublin want to build long term, I think he was a really good appointment, and we're already seeing the fruits of that, and it'd be interesting to see if Clare are going full throttle, which I think they will be on Sunday. How will Dublin shape up to this? Because I think it was only 2 years ago, Mark, All-Ireland quarter-final, they got taken apart below on Gaelic grounds. I think Clare had 5 goals scored by half-time. Tony Kelly ran riot, and it'd be just interesting to see are Dublin, how much have they closed that gap, have they entirely closed it? Because if they can turn Clare over down here, as I said earlier, this would be massive for them going into the Leinster Championship.
Absolutely, Rory, because look, to tailor the tape for Dublin, I think it was a pleasing league for O'Callaghan and the Dublin management. They did try out quite a few players. I mean, tailor the tape, 4 wins, the 1 loss against Clare, and then I thought it was an admirable comeback against Wexford. I thought Wexford at certain periods in that game in Croke Park certainly were under control. So the fact that Dublin survived with a draw was very admirable. I mean, they've hit 199 points so far in the league. They've put an awful lot of the lower teams to the sword quite easily. So they've averaged, 38, 39 points per game, 22 points conceded, the 14 goals scored. But as you say yourself here, Rory, in terms of that full back line, they still leaked 9 goals during the league, which may be a bit of a concern. And as you say, Donald Burke has come back injury-free, pre-season's gone very well. And look, he's back to his brilliant best in terms of his frees, 148 being scored. And look, he's getting an awful lot of output from John Henderson again, full forward line. You also have Purcell contributing in the half forward line. And then you have the likes of the experience here, likes of Connor Burke, Paddy Smith, as you see in Liam Rush, screaming to be a middle third player, isn't he? This year as well, and Owen O'Donnell coming back. So look, there's a few moving parts here, Rory, and if they can all gel together, is this the year for Dublin, really? And I'm looking maybe beyond a 1B final here. Is this a county realistically going to win Bob O'Keefe come May?
Yeah, I think, again, I don't want to jump the gun. We'll learn a lot more at 3 o'clock on Sunday as to where Dublin are, because a crushing defeat won't do them any good either if it does happen. But hard to see that happen. And I think they're a much more seasoned team than they were a couple of years ago. I know it's only 2-3 years, but as we said, like, they're a lot more sure what they're at. They have that big threat inside which they're using. So look, I think that at the minute they're possibly looking the best shape going into Leinster Championship. Saying that, like, Kilkenny, and Galway are showing signs of improvement as well. But you'd be very surprised if Dublin aren't one of your 3 qualifiers at least, and they will definitely be putting their sights on winning the Leinster Championship. Yeah, and I know we're probably going to touch on this in our preview for the championship, but one crowd we didn't really talk about were Kilkenny. But again, we spoke about the last couple of years that Kilkenny needed to find forwards during the league, and I don't know, has anyone really put up their hands to really be in contention for a jersey, which means they're still relying on your Mullen, Keoghan, all these guys being fit. So that's where I think Dublin, they might smell blood there with kind of Kilkenny still in transition, Galway definitely in transition, and the Wexford team in decline now. Saying that, Wexford could have very easily beaten Dublin in that league match, which would have changed everything. So, but no, I put Dublin slightly ahead of them at the minute, and we'll see how they get on. And in fact, going prediction-wise, Mark, this might sound mad. I'm thinking maybe a draw at normal time here, and then Clare will win in extra time. That'd be my prediction. We might have that stronger bench when it comes to it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dublin start 100 miles an hour here and get a bit of a lead, and Clare kind of are reeling them in, and we end up with extra time. And second match slightly delayed, which will annoy some of the travelling support from our second city. But that'd be my prediction. And to be a bit more specific on the first one, I'll probably go Limerick 5 points. I just think that if it comes to the crunch of it, Cork might have half an eye in tip, whereas Limerick can go full throttle at it. And I'll go Clare Dublin to draw. I think you get good odds on that, and Clare to win after extra time.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated here to just see this Dublin Clare and how both these teams perform. Is there a statement of intent from either of these teams heading into their respective provincial championships? And look, we've waxed lyrically on this podcast about Dublin, and fair play to them. Last season, the All-Ireland quarter-final thoroughly deserved to beat Limerick. They were absolutely superb on the day. Their work rate, physicality, their ability on the ball, identifying players inside was absolutely outstanding. Again, we're going to have to see elements of this again from O'Callaghan's men again in the Gaelic grounds. But I'm just fascinated to see what lessons, as you said, they've learned from Clare, because Clare's run game is very potent here, Rory. And if defensively they haven't learned much from Clare's past fixtures, it's going to be a detrimental blow for them. So for me, Dublin more so than Clare, because I think we know with Clare, the characters, the performers on show, they'll bring it in Munster Hurling Championship. But I think Dublin, if they want to be seen as a genuine Leinster contender, they have to produce a performance on Sunday. If not, then the questions will start to emerge here on Dublin in terms of the consistency. I'm with you here, Rory. I think this could go extra time, and I think if that's the case, Cork and Limerick psychologists will be working double overtime with the players in the dressing rooms. But there's not much between these teams in the league, and I think, given what the way the weather is supposed to be forecast, game of 2 halves, would not be surprised extra time. Yeah, I think I'll go with Clare marginally. I think Peter Duggan has a big say in this match, particularly inside full forward line. I think there's goals.
I heard O'Donnell is due to start as well, Mark.
Oh, really?
O'Donnell. So, the Clare seem to be, word is they're going to go strong in this. And I suppose, as you pointed out earlier as well, Mark, it's going to be like from my own place, 6 Mile Bridge into Gaelic Grounds, 18 minutes. Like, it's a lot of South Clare. Like, Clare are going to take their full ticket allocation here, and they're going to have big support, which, puts a bit of pressure on and gives Lohan a bit of motivation, like that there are people, if they want to like win over the Clare support early and, deliver a big performance, get everyone on side early and get an old trophy. Didn't do us any harm, albeit it was 1A a couple of years ago, but yeah, it's just another factor. I think Clare will have big support in there.
They're national titles at the end of the day, Rory. 1A, 1B. I mean, Division 2 last week, Laois winning against Kerry sets them up very well for Joe McDonough. So, I mean, that's your springboard. That's your momentum heading into championship. So, I think for Clare, they'll get over the line. I think just enough. But again, I think the fascinating element for me is Dublin and how they perform, really, because they've shown very much potency in scoring heavy against, like, no disrespects to the Downs and the Carlos. But again, this is now where they have to really set down the marker here for everyone else in Leinster. So, yeah, two fascinating games here, Rory. I suppose we'll leave it there, Rory. I mean, it's been a good opening episode tonight. I suppose next week we'll review these 1A and 1B games, and then we'll probably cast the net out a little bit, particularly around the under-20s, but also on the Munster and Leinster Senior Hurling Championship previews, just to see who are the teams we're thinking are on the upward trajectory and who are the ones that might be in a little bit of bother. I suppose until then, Rory, many thanks. Enjoy the games at the weekend in TUS Gaelic grounds, and we'll chat next week.
You too, Mark. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.